Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our daily word. Today's daily word is the daily word number 623. So I'm glad you could join me for our time together as you've carved out space to be with me as we've continued on our journey together through Scripture. Last night we had confirmation here, and we prayed together, of course, and then we had dinner and talked about how the Bible was formed, and they got their Bibles, and we kind of went through that and all the writers of Scripture. And, it's a kind of an overwhelming kind of experience. But you also know at the end that we go back to the sanctuary and pray together. Well, it was cool last night because the choir is back practicing. And so we went and I had the kids sit in the choir with choir members, and Brooklyn relit the Christ candle, and we got to pray with the choir. And I thought that was really cool that we got to do that. And so we'll probably do that again next week as we meet together as well. But that was really cool. And for me, it was a reminder of one of the things I've always talked about in these daily words about what it means to be in community and how we live in community together. And it's really cool that we could do that in that very simple way. It didn't last long, but in that very simple way. Then, of course, we got in our circle and took our picture of our feet as we journey together. So that was a cool thing. And so for this morning, from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 10, it's one verse, but it's part of a bigger thing that Paul writes to the church in Corinth about his life and about the resurrection of Christ, if you were to read the whole thing. But in verse 10, he says this: "But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me has not been in vain." Paul talks a lot about who he is and what he's done and where his life's been. And then he reminds himself, I think, about, by the grace of God, I am what I am. I read an interesting article early this morning. It's from the Daily Stoic. If you don't know about that, I'm glad to share it with you. About a rock star who lived his life, and he was revered by all the major rock stars. And then he was diagnosed with a terminal lung cancer diagnosis. And of course, when that happens, it changes your life completely. And he said three simple words that have stuck with me, and I think would stick with all of us. He said, "Enjoy every sandwich." And I think that's an interesting perspective that kind of fits with this scripture. By the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace toward me has not been in vain. I've come to terms with that a bit in my life recently. I've been struggling, you all know, struggling with this leg and my knee and my hip and all of that, and I limp. Part of it's because I still hurt. Part of it, I think, is because it's habit. And I have a couple of folks who are really concerned, and they just want me to not limp anymore. They want me to get back to my old self. And they ask me every week, "Are you going to get back to your old self? Are you ever going to stop limping?" And I don't know the answer to that. But this scripture kind of resonates with me in my life. I love to mow grass. I really do. I can't do it. I have to be okay with that. I love to do other things I can't do anymore. I may always limp. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of just the way my body is now, and I can't help myself. But then Paul reminds me and us as we live our lives that our authentic self, who we are, isn't about selfishness, isn't about not limping necessarily. Maybe it really is about enjoy every sandwich. Maybe it really is about relating to people right where you are in the midst of our lives, and just to be who we are in life. And Paul has this very simple reminder for us. His grace toward me has not been in vain. I sometimes think, in the midst of all of my struggles with my walking and my legs and how that looks and how I look to people. I don't always stand up straight. I limp a lot. I hurt a lot. But and I too have said, man, I don't know where God's at in this. What's my struggle about? Why do I have to do this? And then the scripture jumped out at me this morning. Sorry. By the grace of God, I am what I am. And that's true. By the grace of God, I am what I am. I'll soon be 59, not 29. And I'm not going to go back to that. I think I'm coming to terms with that. And then the most important part of this for me, and His grace toward me has not been in vain. God's grace hasn't been in vain. God's grace has been with me through all of this, through all of the things I've struggled with. Put amazing people in my life. My physical therapist, they're amazing people in my life who have vowed to always be my friend. And so together, we're reminded that we really should, in our lives, enjoy every sandwich. Now, my confirmation kids, 4 of them, they're great kids, and they're just soaking it all in. And I can't do what I want. I've got some cool ideas that I want to do with them, maybe in the spring. I don't know. But if not, we'll figure out another way and be okay with that, because God's grace towards me and towards you has not been in vain. And that's such an important life lesson that struck me today. And the last few days I've been really tired, walking in the hospital and doing all this stuff, and then cooking last night and being with the kids and getting home at 9 o'clock and all of that stuff. And then the scripture jumps out at me. I am what I am, and by the grace of God, it's not been in vain. And for you, it's true. For us, that's true, right? We are who we are. And we really should enjoy every sandwich, because that's an important thing for us as God's given us grace. So may you know that grace as I'm working on it even today in my life. May you know God's love and my love for you, and I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Have a great day.